Talk Radio.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it today? I don't even know what it is. Wednesday, May 30th. And let me just, I guess, apologize in advance. I am jet lagged. My eyes are like drooping. I feel like all I want to do right now is go to sleep. But we're going to do the show. We're going to do it. And after this, I've actually got a Skype interview with Newsmax in New York City, I think with Joe Walsh. So that'll be interesting. I think we're talking about Syria or something like that. So hi, everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to come listen to us. Today's exciting. We achieved one of our goals. So we made it. We got to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube today. That was the goal for May, and we achieved that goal. So thank you for everybody who subscribed on YouTube. Great work. Thank you for those of you who shared the YouTube videos and got people to watch them and therefore increased subscriptions. Great. And now from 10,000, it's to 100,000. The next goal is 100,000. We'll see how long it takes us, but that is a goal. Ultimately, of course, 1 million, but we have to get to 100,000 first. So 10,000, 100,000. At some point it becomes exponential because more people watch the videos, more people share them, more people subscribe, and that just feeds off of itself. So I remind you to share videos. I remind you to encourage your friends to subscribe, watch the videos, share the videos, and let's I won't say let's give Jordan Peterson a run for the money. That would be somewhat pretentious, and he and those guys are in the stratospheres. But what the hell? Let's do the best that we can do and get up there. Let's see, what else? Patreon. Today we're doing a Patreon. We're answering Patreon questions. So once a month, we put out a survey and we ask people to ask questions. Anybody over $25 a month gets to make introduce questions into it, and then everybody votes on those questions. And then I answer the questions that get the most votes. So today we have at least 4 questions that got a significant number of votes. We'll see. Maybe we'll get to some of the minor questions as well. So if you want to ask a question, if you want to participate, please become a patron. Become a patron anyway, because it's a way to support the show, and it's a way to allow me to provide you with these values. Hopefully you're enjoying the show. Hopefully you get something out of it. So even $1 a month, $2 a month, 25, 50, 100, 500, 1,000, 2,500. There are perks associated with every level. We'll be doing more perks tomorrow on the show. I think anybody who's above 100 will get to be live by video with me, and we'll be doing a Q&A, and then we'll open it up to anybody on the phone, anybody who's a Patreon subscriber to call up with questions. So we'll do a live open Q&A with Patreon subscribers tomorrow. We'll start with $100 and up level. So please become a patron. We are, I think, at 430, something like that. The goal for the end of June, which is going to be tough to meet because it requires a lot of people to become patrons in the next few weeks, is to get to 500 patrons. 500 patrons by the end of June. And my goal for the end of the year, again, very ambitious, but we've got some plans on how to get there, is to get to 1,000 patrons and really start generating some good funds, and we can do a lot of fun stuff once we get some more funds supporting the show, supporting my speaking activities, supporting the podcast, the videos, and everything else, and we'll be able to do a lot of cool stuff. I'm thinking of bringing in some interns here in Puerto Rico, maybe going to some of the universities here in Puerto Rico, having them help out with some of the video production and audio production. Maybe getting them to shoot some short videos with me. We'll see. That's part of what we will do with the funds that you guys provide on Patreon. So please do that. Other than that, keep the good work with the sharing on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. All right, let's get to the questions. We've got a bunch of them, some of them hard. So they're going to be challenged. As I said, we can't go over much over an hour today because, wow, we've got somebody from Slovakia on YouTube. I've never been to Slovakia. It's one of only, I think, 6 countries in Europe I've never been to. So if you're interested, kind of figure out a way to invite me to Slovakia. Give me an invite, and it'll be great to go and speak in Slovakia. Oh, by the way, I'm back in Puerto Rico. You probably noticed the gray, boring background that we have. Yes, we are back in Puerto Rico. We are back to grayness. I don't have that sexy, cool hotel room look that we had at the W in London. All right, so let's get to the questions. Somebody's asking quickly. Which other countries I have not been to in Europe? Let me see. So this is quick. Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia, Latvia, and then like the Moldova and the dictatorship. There's one dictatorship in Europe other than Russia, of course. Belarus. Those are the 6 I only think are the only. I'm not counting the little ones, and the little ones, the little tiny countries. But I think those are the only ones that I haven't been to. So Belarus, yes. All right. So let's. So one way to get a question to me is, as I said, through the Patreon survey stuff. Another way to get a question to me is, if you make a contribution on PayPal, you can attach a question to it and I'll answer it as well. So, and of course, the third way is using Super Chat on YouTube. So all ways that have $ next to them are ways in which you can ask questions and get me to answer. And I'm not putting a dollar amount on it. So pretty much any dollar amount, although the higher the amount, the more likely it is that I answer. But yes, please, use Super Chat, use PayPal. As I said, I'm jet lagged today. My mind is like, it's not a good time for me to be answering these Patreon questions because they're hard. Okay, let's start. What is the root cause of the problems in poor Black and Hispanic communities in the United States? So, I mean, it's a good question, and it's an important question, and it's one that I think it's important. It's important to get a good answer because it'll help us provide solutions, or at least offer solutions around it. So let's start with the Black community, because I think there's some commonalities. There's some things that apply to both the Black community and the Hispanic community and the poor white community as well. But there are also some unique characteristics that apply to both, that apply to the Black community, and then that apply specifically to the Hispanic community. I think others that apply specifically to the white poor community. But let's start with the Black community. Well, the Black community, I think the answer here is obvious. The roots of poverty among the Black community go back to slavery and ultimately the institutionalized racism that happened from the late 19th century all the way until the 1960s. So you had an institutionalized racism in the South and an uninstitutionalized but prevalent racism in the North, I think, through the 1960s. Obviously, in the South, it was much, much worse, partially because it was legislated, it was government sanctioned, it was the rule of law sanctioned discrimination. The rule of law laws actually were part of the discrimination against Black. Sheriffs did not protect their lives, their property, and so on. So there was clear discrimination, which made it more difficult. Not to say it was impossible. Some Blacks did achieve amazing things. I think Andrew Bernstein has a talk about successful Black entrepreneurs in the early part of the 20th century. That is pretty amazing, and it's pretty spectacular what some of these people achieved, given the racism that was inflicted upon them. So through the 60s, I think, they had a really, really, really bad time that made it really hard for them to actually attain any kind of material success. So I would definitely argue that would be the initial cause of their poverty, initial cause of their lack of economic success. So that is up until the 1960s. But then you would say, well, starting in the 1960s, that goes away. And indeed, you get, in a sense, a reverse racism where a lot of blacks, because of affirmative action and other things, get bumped up, if you will, and have more opportunities available to them. And to some extent, that is the case. But I'd say there are a couple of issues here. One is that racism does not go away. Racism existed, particularly in certain parts of the country, but I think all over the country, and I think exists to this day. I am one of those people, and I know many of you disagree with me on this, that think that racism still exists today, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, but it is definitely out there in the world, and it makes it more difficult for people to advance. But in addition to that, and I think more important than that, what has happened in the Black community is that they have absorbed and accepted and institutionalized a mentality of victimhood and entitlement, which psychologically and materially makes it difficult for them to rise up. They have been told now by their leaders and by the intellectual leaders that deal in race issues that they have no chance, that racism is a million times worse than it probably really is, that the state owes them, that they never had a chance to be successful, that slavery is still haunting them. And again, to some extent, I think it is. But the Black intellectuals and white intellectuals, the intellectual class, has been educating them in a way that discourages their own entrepreneurship. It discourages them from taking on personal responsibility to achieve their own success and to achieve their own flourishing. And I blame the intellectuals here. I do not blame the people. I blame the intellectuals. The people are just trying to survive. The people are the one who deal with the racism when it comes up. The people are the one who deal with the fact that there's very little capital built up in Black families because of the heritage of slavery and then racism in America. So they have a capital deficit, if you will. Whereas Americans who've lived here for many generations, there's some wealth transmission from generation to generation, which helps. The Black community doesn't have that. So they have a deficit in a starting point, but then they are told that they are meek and they are miserable and they don't have any chance and the system's rigged against them and they shouldn't even try and they should wait for the welfare check and they should demand a bigger welfare check and they should demand a job. And if they can't get a job, it's not because their fault, it's because of racism. So it's never their fault. So they've not been taught any kind of personal responsibility. Indeed, personal responsibility has been crushed within the Black community. And the Democrats have told them, oh, no, you're victims. You're horrible. And Republicans have done a lot of this as well. We're just going to take care of you. Don't worry. We'll give you favors. Don't worry. Affirmative action will work. And then, of course, even affirmative action is so distorted and perverted in that if you get a job, do you know you got it based on skill and ability, based on talent? Or did you get it based on the color of your skin? And does that put a question mark inside their own minds about their own self-esteem? And if they don't have self-esteem, then they don't project that self-esteem to other people and they don't serve as good role models. And again, you get this cycle of lack of personal responsibility, lack of pride, lack of self-esteem, and lack of projection of self-esteem onto other people, right? I'm only just getting started. There's a lot, these are the kind of issues, right? So that personal responsibility, they haven't been taught it. It's not being expected of them. They've been taught that they are entitled. And as part of this entitlement is the war on poverty, where the state has basically said, we're responsible. We're going to take care of the poor. Don't worry. Again, don't be responsible for yourself. Don't fix the problems locally yourselves. The government is here to help you. The government is here to solve your problems. Again, here's a check. Don't worry. Be happy as you can be being poor. We will take care of you. And that, again, institutionalizes a mentality that is anti-effort, anti-ambition, anti-entrepreneurial, anti-personal responsibility. So the welfare state, the war on poverty itself, has crippled this community and has institutionalized so many of them into poverty. And it's so tragic. And it's not just the welfare state, and it's not just welfare itself, but think about something like the minimum wage. The minimum wage originally was passed in order to prevent blacks from taking union jobs away from whites. If you look it up, the minimum wage was a racist policy instituted by unions in the North when blacks were migrating north in the 20s and 30s to get jobs. They were escaping. They were taking personal responsibility. They were escaping the racism of the South and were moving north to take new industrial jobs. And the unions run by whites felt afraid. And what they did was they established a minimum wage to price out these black workers. And to this day, minimum wages price out the least educated, the poorest of the poor. Those are going to be the inner city black teenagers. So they never get that first rung. They never get that first job. They never get an opportunity to advance. So the system is rigged against them. And yeah, it's rigged against poor, uneducated whites. It's rigged against poor, uneducated Latinos. But it's certainly rigged against the poor, uneducated blacks. And it again helps and reinforces all this rhetoric. And when they can't find a job, that reinforces the rhetoric about racism. That reinforces the rhetoric about the society's structured against them. That reinforces the victimhood. It reinforces the entitlement. It reinforces all the bad stuff. So you can see how the combination of intellectuals telling them, it's not your responsibility, it's not your fault, and indeed, the structure created through the welfare state, through the war on poverty, holds them back. And if you add on that the elements of racism that exist in our culture, I mean, they really are screwed. And it really, really, really is sad. And I really, really, really don't blame them. I blame them intellectuals. I blame the welfare state. I blame any economist, any thinker, anybody who knows anything who advocates for the minimum wage. I blame the war on poverty. And then add to that something that Daniel brought up a minute ago. The fact that they get the worst education possible in the universe. Public education in the inner cities is the worst education in America and one of the worst educations anywhere in the world. And for many of these kids, these schools are much more like, I don't know, detention places where they hold them during the day so that they don't go out and join gangs and stuff, rather than the places where they get a real education. So now, not only are they poor, not only does everybody tell them they shouldn't take responsibility for their own lives, not only does the economic regulations and the economic system that we have, the licensing laws that we have, make it more difficult for them to find a job and to start a business and advance in life. Not only do the elements of racism that do exist in the world today make it more difficult for them, but then we don't educate them. And yes, in some places charter schools are helping, but charter schools are not the solution. The solution is privatization. The solution is providing them with private schools. And it's not true that they're against private schools. If you go to places like Minneapolis that have a voucher system, and you go to other places that have vouchers, The Black community is for them. It's the middle class that doesn't like charter schools. It's white middle class people that doesn't like charter schools and doesn't like these experimentations. It's the intellectuals who don't like it. Now, Skylar makes a good point, which I hadn't thought of in the context of this question, but is absolutely true. The drug wars. Think about what the drug wars do to this community. So you've got a poor community. You've got a community that, for a variety of reasons that I just mentioned, cannot find jobs. And then you top that off with a war on drugs that creates a massive incentive for young people to get involved in the drug trade because the reward is huge and they can't see a future for themselves. I really recommend the series The Wire. If you want to understand the drug trade, if you want to understand that world in which young Black kids live in and what it entails and what getting involved in the drug trade, what it entails to be involved in the drug trade, and what are the dangers, and what is the extent to which they are, they are sacrificed in this war, and the cost of not participating in the drug trade. Then watch The Wire, all five seasons. It is one of the best written shows ever. It is such a good show. Now, it's difficult to get into. Granted, I had a hard time. I tried to watch it a couple of times before I finally got into it. You have to get through 4 or 5 episodes of the first season to really get in the flow of it. But it is so good at dramatizing the way the drug war destroys these young people and the communities in which they live, so that you don't get communities in which people go out into the streets and play and interact and talk to one another and inspire one another and provide role models for one another. Because everybody's afraid to go into the street because they're shooting in the street. And they're shooting in the street directly because of the drug war, because the war on drugs creates such a huge incentive to fight, because the rewards, the profits are so massive. And of course, all of this plays together to create a gangster rap type of mentality, that glorifies violence, that glorifies the drug trade, but it also glorifies victimhood. So again, it's a complicated, multi-dimensional, multi-level thing that's going on. And it's a real crisis, and it's unbelievably tragic. Right? Unbelievably tragic. And when you talk about the Hispanic community, I would say all of these things, with regard to the war on poverty and the minimum wage, and all these things are part of it. That's one thing. What makes the Hispanic community different than the Black community is the Hispanic community, instead of having to deal with institutionalized racism, it still has to deal with some racism. There's no question about that. And there is racism against Hispanics all over this country. But the bigger issue is illegal immigration and the consequences of illegal immigration to this community. That is the fact that they have to live in a black market, the fact that they work for a living, but that work is not recognized as productive work. They live in communities that are filled with fear. All of these things hamper their ability to accumulate wealth. They don't participate in the banking system. They don't participate in the investment system. It's very difficult to accumulate wealth when you're in the underground community. It's also true that many of the Hispanics are relatively new immigrants, and it takes a new immigration population about 2 generations to 3 generations to really achieve financial status. So if you go back to the Irish, the Italians, the Poles, it's taken a while for them to reach that status. And if you look at 3rd generation Hispanics, they've done much better, and they do quite well. But it's that 1st generation and the 2nd generation that has a hard time. And then, of course, if they came in illegally, they have to deal with all the problems that are involved with coming in illegally. that hamper their ability to accumulate wealth, that hamper their ability to get jobs and to advance in their jobs. They might get a basic job, but they never get the next step up, because once the next step up, now you need the papers, you need all the bureaucratic stuff that the government requires in order for you to actually work for a living, right? God forbid you should work for a living. So yeah, there's nothing, I would argue, inherent in these people, inherent in their culture, inherent in any aspect of what they do that would suggest that they would stay poor. It is the system and the intellectuals who have taught them what they have taught them, the ideas that are being taught to them here in America, not over there, here in America. So that's the challenge. And it's not going to be easy to undo this, right? It's not going to be easy. It means changing immigration laws. You can see how hard that is. And I can't even talk about that among objectivists because they freak out when I mention changing immigration laws and actually making more people legal and allowing a vast array of immigrants to come into the United States to work and work legally, and making anybody who can find a job in the United States legal. That would help a lot with the Hispanic community. With the Black community, it involves, firing all their intellectuals, so it's a matter of really changing our attitude towards them, raising expectations, demanding personal responsibility. It means getting rid of the minimum wage. It means getting rid of licensing laws. It means getting rid of slowly phasing out the welfare state and slowly eliminating all the barriers to entry for poor people into middle classhood and wealth. And that would help poor white people as well, although poor white people, a lot of them, gave up, a lot of them come from communities where the culture is, anti-effort and anti-success for a variety of reasons, because they're the intellectuals are not telling them that that's the case. But if you go to Appalachia and places like that, that's the attitude is just an attitude of losers. And they're Blacks and they're Hispanics that have that same attitude. There are always going to be individuals that have that attitude who are losers. And the problem is when you see large populations, and then you can't just attribute it to a few people who are losers. You've got to look for cultural reasons. And here, those are the cultural reasons I've identified. All right. Hopefully that answered your question. This was John. And of course, the best thing you could do for all of these communities is privatize education. Privatize education, providing them with competitive, real, innovative education, and giving them educational saving accounts, and placing, again, the moral responsibility for educating their kids on the parents. All of that would change the dynamics, and of course, legalizing drugs. So the solution is multifaceted because the problem is multifaceted. But none of the things that I've said, not a single one of the things that I've mentioned as solutions to poverty in the Black community and poverty in the Hispanic community is on anybody's political agenda. It's not on Trump's political agenda. It's not on the Democrats' political agenda. The libertarians never really talk about it. So you really need a new political agenda. You really need a new political party. You really need a new approach to politics to really get at this problem and to dig out of it. All right, and now for something completely different. Oh God, these are the questions that I dread. Because, they challenge me and they push me. And all right, here's, this is the question about anti-concepts. What is the best way to explain anti-concepts? And what are the most dangerous and damaging anti-concept used in the media and politics today? All right. So here I don't know what the best way to explain them. I mean, I'll give it an attempt in a minute. But here I'm going to refer to the philosophers among us, and I will say that I will have, when I have a philosopher on next time, when I do an interview with them, I'll talk about, and we'll talk about anti-concepts and get deeper into that and discuss it in more depth. But the best source for a discussion of this is Ayn Rand. It's the Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, where she talks about this. She also talks about this in the Ayn Rand letter, and even in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. She talks about in an essay called Extremism or the Art of Smearing. But let me read you a section from the Ayn Rand letter, which I think is clarifying for this. So this is a letter Ayn Rand wrote. She says, an anti-concept is an unnecessary and rationally unusable term designated to replace and obliterate some legitimate concept. So an anti-concept is an unnecessary and rationally unusable term designated to replace and obliterate some legitimate concept. I'll give you a few examples in a minute. The use of anti-concepts gives the listeners a sense of approximate understanding. They kind of get it. But in the realm of cognition, nothing is as bad as the approximate. Cognition, thinking, requires clarity. Requires clarity. All right. So she gives an example here. Let me read you her example, and then I'll give you some of mine. One of today's fashionable anti-concepts is polarization. Its meaning is not very clear, except that it is something bad. Bad. Undesirable. Socially destructive. It's evil. Something that would split the country into irreconcilable camps and conflicts. You hear this a lot today. She wrote this in, I don't know, in the 60s. But it's true today. It is used mainly in political issues and serves as a kind of argument from intimidation. Oh no, that's a polarizing argument. You don't want to make that. It replaces the discussion of the merits. In other words, the truth or falsehood of a given idea by the menacing accusation that such an idea would polarize the country. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you hear all the time. All the time. Which is supposed to make one's opponents retreat, protesting that we didn't mean it. Mean what? Is it true what you're saying? Isn't it true? Okay. She continues, it is doubtful, even in the midst of today's intellectual decadence, remember, this is 50 years ago, that one could get away with declaring explicitly, quote, let us abolish all debate on fundamental principles. Though some people have tried that, and certainly Donald Trump embodies that. If, however, one declares, don't let us polarize, that's one thing, I guess Donald Trump doesn't try to do because he's a polarizer. He doesn't mind polarizing. Don't let us polarize, but this is what the media constantly talks about. And suggests a vague image of warring camps ready to fight with no mention of the fight's object. One has a chance to silence the mentally wary. The use of polarization as a pejorative term means the suppression of fundamental principles. And such is the pattern and function of anti-concepts, right? So you get it. So it's a concept that doesn't have a clear meaning, that wants to undercut some other concept that has a clear meaning and is important. In this case, truth. In this case, principle. We don't want to talk about principles, and we don't want to talk about their truth or falsehood because that's not what we want to talk about. We want to eliminate discussion of certain ideas. And the way to eliminate, we can't even talk about that. That's polarizing. And you can think of a number of concepts that are similar to this, right? Extremism. Ayn Rand talks about extremism in this context as well. That's what she writes about in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, that extremism, that's extreme. But is it true? No, it's extreme. Can't have extreme ideas, right? Or politically correct is a way just to silence. We can't even talk about that. Well, put aside if it's politically correct, is it correct? Is it true? Is it legitimate? Well, so these are terms that are used. These are anti-concepts. They don't mean anything. What does politically correct mean? How do you actually define? Does anybody have a definition, a clear definition of political correctness, where you can clearly know what language is politically correct and what is not, what is okay, what is not okay? No, the whole point of a concept like political correctness is that it's fuzzy, that we don't know when it applies and when it doesn't apply, what it applies to and when it doesn't apply to. And the opponents can jump in and say, oh, that's politically correct, and dismiss it at any point in time. And they get to define it and change the definition of it constantly. It's not a static thing. It has no definition. It's not clear. It's exactly what she says. It's an approximate understanding. You can't even know certain things are not politically correct. You can't say certain words, certain ideas, but exactly which ones? So somebody says PC is not offending the left. Yeah, but not offending the left is meaningless. That doesn't mean anything. It's not a definition. You can't know in advance what it's going to be. What offends them changes constantly. So it's not a definition. It's an anti-concept. Right? Here's another one. Inequality. Inequality. Nobody knows what that means. Or the flip side of it, equality. What does equality mean? What is it? Equality of what? Equality of outcome. Equality of outcome of money, wealth, income, intelligence, skin color. What does it mean? And of course, here, the whole idea of inequality, and the debate about inequality, the whole inequality debate, is there to wipe out a bunch of different concepts. It's there to wipe out desert. Well, there's a lot of inequality, but is it deserved or isn't it deserved? People have made a lot of money, but they deserve it or don't deserve it, right? It's meant to wipe out desert. But more importantly, it's meant to wipe out the one meaning of equality that means something. What does equality actually mean? Equality in politics and economics is a spin-off of politics. Equality, the only thing equality means politically is equality of rights, equality of liberty, equality of freedom. But that's exactly what equality of outcome, inequality are meant to obliterate. Because you are not free if inequality is a problem. You are not free if the goal is equality. You are just a slave to the goal of equality. We can take your stuff at any time and give it to anybody we want. So inequality and equality are anti-concepts that are designed to reject the idea of freedom. And that's why I emphasize over and over again, inequality, income inequality, to the extent that what we're talking about is the gap, the Gini coefficient, the measurable gap between the poor and the rich, the middle class and the rich, whatever that number in economics means, is a feature of freedom, not a bug. It's not a problem. But it's used everywhere, in every conversation you have, on the left and with many people on the right. Even Jordan Peterson talks about inequality, the problem of inequality, that there are problems with inequality. Sam Harris constantly equivocates between inequality and poverty. You could argue there's a problem of poverty, but there's no problem of inequality because there's no such thing. And again, it's there to obliterate the idea of equality of freedom. It's there to obliterate freedom. It's there to obliterate desert. It's there to legitimize you didn't build that. All right. Somebody says economics is not a spin-off of politics. No, it's not. But political economy, there's a field called political economy, which is what we're really talking about. Economics is a science that studies production and trade. But the political manifestations of economics, issues like equality or inequality that people raise now, these anti-concepts that are meaningless, are issues in political equality. They're issues in the intersection between politics and economics. All right, just to be clear, because we're talking about clarity of concepts. Okay, here's another one. Social justice. Social justice means nothing. What does it mean? Define it. There is no definition. It's a fuzzy term that kind of means justice towards groups, but what does that mean? How do you have justice towards groups? And what's it meant to obliterate? It's obliterate the concept of justice, the idea of justice, of individual justice, of people getting what they deserve. Again, there is a huge effort in our world to obliterate the idea of dessert. Not dessert that you eat at the end of the meal, not the sweet stuff. Dessert in terms of what you deserve, particularly economic dessert, but all dessert, justice. There is a concentrated effort to do away with the classic definition, certainly the objectivist definition of justice. And social justice, by making it social, by eliminating the individual, and by eliminating dessert for the individual, because groups, they don't deserve anything. Eliminates that, it undercuts the whole thing. So social justice is one of the most pernicious, evil, horrible, horrific anti-concepts in our world right now that is being used. And you hear it all the time. And the problem is that now when you say justice, they think social justice. But social justice means nothing. Social justice is a meaningless term. There is only individual justice. There's no collective justice. There's no collective justice. I don't know, and somebody asking if Mao came up with the idea of social justice. I don't know. I doubt it. It doesn't seem like it. But social justice exists in Catholic teachings, and then the left, I think, picked it up from the Catholics. So I think that's the sequence. But anyway, it's about collectivizing the concept of justice, which is not possible, and therefore this is a pernicious, evil anti-concept. Multiculturalism is another one. Right? What does that mean? Eating Chinese food? Being pro-free trade, being pro-globalization, or does it mean knocking down your own culture and pretending that the West culture is just the same as everybody else's culture? So multiculturalism means nothing. And what is it meant to obliterate? It's meant to obliterate the idea that some cultures are better than others. It's meant to obliterate the idea that there is a standard by which we measure when a culture is good and when a culture is bad. And that measure is how good is it for human life? Okay. All right. Let's see, what else? What other? Okay, here one's that you hear libertarians use and leftists use: corporatism. Corporatism. There is no such thing as corporatism. There's cronyism, but there's no such thing as corporatism. And what is it trying to do here, right? Corporatism is cronyism, right? It's the idea that corporations run things. Corporations run the world. It's supposed to undercut the idea of legitimacy of the corporation. It's supposed to make capitalism suspect, particularly with regard to big business. Big business, ooh, evil. There's something bad here. And you hear libertarians and conservatives using this all the time, and it's despicable. Right? And what they're trying to do is make illegitimate, because a lot of libertarians are suspicious of corporations. They're trying to make the corporation suspect by making the corporation inevitably crony. Inevitably crony. So corporatism, and here's another one, crony capitalism. No, capitalism doesn't have, or conscious capitalism, or anything capitalism. Capitalism is capitalism. It has a clear definition. By adding crony to it, you're undercutting the definition of what capitalism is, and it's not capitalism anymore. Cronyism is a feature of statism. It's not a feature of capitalism. Capitalism is anti-statism. Right. So there is no such thing. Now, if those of you interested in the corporation, I have a whole course, I think 4.5-hour course on the corporation, on all the different aspects of the corporation: legal, philosophical, moral, political, economic. And it's available as a podcast on any podcast app. If you go to the podcast app, if you go to on an iPhone, you go to Podcast or Stitcher or any of these apps, and you go to my podcast, Yaron Brook, and then you look for the corporate or corporation, you will find it. I think it's in 3 lectures, 3 parts. But if you're interested in the issue of corporations and why they're legitimate, because I haven't answered that here, and I don't intend to right now, then that's a good place to find it. But anarcho-capitalism, here's one some of you will be upset at. Anarcho-capitalism is an anti-concept. Again, anything capitalism is an anti-concept because it obliterates capitalism. Capitalism, its essence of capitalism, is that there is a monopoly over the use of force. It is the social system in which there is a monopoly over the use of force, over the use of retaliatory force, in which that retaliatory force is only used in defense of individual rights, primarily property rights. That's what capitalism is. The existence of government is built into the definition, the clear definition that Ayn Rand provides for capitalism. So there is no such thing as anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism is just anarcho on the way to authoritarianism. That's what it is. So there is no such thing as anarcho-capitalism. All right. You get the trend. I'm not going to give you any more. I mean, Ayn Rand identified a few other ones. Consumerism. There's no such thing as consumerism. People consume. Duty might be the most evil of all of them, and I'll leave that for another time. We can talk about duty. But duty as a moral concept is evil, and she wrote about it. There's an essay by Ayn Rand on duty as an anti-concept. Look it up on Google. It's available for free. There's a segment of an essay about why duty is an anti-concept and how evil the concept of duty really is. Maybe the most evil of all the anti-concepts. Ethnicity. Ethnicity. Here's what Ayn Rand has to say about ethnicity. Quote, ethnicity is an anti-concept used as a disguise for the word racism, and it has no clearly defined meaning. The term ethnicity stresses the traditional rather than the physiological characteristics of a group, such as language. But physiology, i.e. race, is involved. So the advocacy of ethnicity means racism plus tradition. That is racism plus conformity. That is racism plus staleness. So if you know what Ayn Rand thought of racism, then you know now what Ayn Rand thought of ethnicity. Later in that same essay, Global Balkanization, in The Voice of Reason, she writes, ethnicity is not a valid consideration morally or politically and does not endow anyone with special rights. Indeed, it doesn't mean anything. So lots of anti-concepts. I also recommend in the Ayn Rand e-store, there's a number of talks by Peter Schwartz on package deals, and package deals are anti-concepts on package deals. And I recommend going to listen to those. Okay. All right. Let's see. So that was that hard question. That was the hardest I had. So there's a lot more I think that can be said. Maybe next time I talk to Greg Salamiri, we can discuss it with him as well. I think he'll have some insights. Okay, I'm going to take a question that I got on PayPal. Somebody sent some dollars in and asked on with PayPal, and that might be it for today. I've got 2 more questions. I've got more questions from Patreon, which I'll just delay for tomorrow or sometime in the future, and I'll get to them as well. I answered the 2 that got the most votes, and then I'll answer the rest, as they come up, as stuff comes up. I'll keep the list and answer them. Let's see. Okay, you can still ask questions also with Super Chat on YouTube. I might be able to take 1 or 2 questions that way. Let me answer this question, and then we'll call it a night. Generally, I'd like to know how you see an objectivist political candidates eventually having a meaningful impact in American political races, and why not now? He writes, I understand that candidates are unlikely to win until the culture shifts, but could it be enough just to run for office to have a meaningful impact? For example, it could increase the visibility of objectivism and bring it into mainstream discussion. Lessons and data learned from successive campaigns could be used to improve future campaigns and public discussions. But if you see this as putting the cart before the horse, then at what point in the evolution of our culture do you see the horse starting to pull the cart, so to speak? I mean, it's a good question, and I don't know if I have a definitive answer for this. So I think this is the challenge with politics. The challenge with politics is it's expensive. It's expensive. It's a lot of money. And what you're basically doing is marketing. And you're marketing to an audience that doesn't know really what you're talking about. So you have to talk politics, not philosophy. And they don't quite understand. So yes, I think over time, over many election cycles, if enough candidates are out there, this would have an impact on people. But is that the most cost-effective use of the money? That is, couldn't you have the same impact by just going around universities and giving those same lectures to college students and doing hundreds of them, thousands of them, and doing them without the limitation that you have to stick to a political agenda and you have to talk about issues that are relevant politically, but you can talk deeper and you can talk wider. Wouldn't that have a more impactful or more impact? Now, it could be that it's difficult to raise money to speak on campuses. I know that because it's very difficult to raise money, and I have a hard enough time raising money, and I have a hard enough time raising money here on Patreon to do these things that, these podcasts and talks at college campuses and things like that, which are the equivalent, I guess, of what a campaign would do. And look how few people are supporting me financially here. But it could be that if I was running for office, a lot more people would give me money. Now, I think that would be unfortunate because, again, I think what I'm doing right now is much more valuable, much more long-term, much more impactful than what I would do if I was running for office. But it could be that the only way to get big money is to get into politics. And if that's the case, then I'm not against it. I'm not against going to politics, but you have to do it right. You have to be good at what you do. You have to be able to make the correct arguments. So it's the same thing as going out to speak, do a tour of college campuses and talk about objectivist application, applying objectivists to different ideas. To do it in politics, you have to have the same skill set and you have to be able to do it and you have to make a good case and you have to make a respectable case. You don't want to turn people off of objectivism. And do we have enough people who can do that? How many people could do it? And if they're that good, then is that the best use of their time? Now, if you say that's the only way we can raise money, then yeah, then let's do it. I have no problem. Now, people are saying, don't become a politician. Well, but if there's more money in becoming a politician, then you go where the market dictates. So if you want me not to become a politician and stay with this, then you have to put your money where your mouth is in a sense of supporting what I'm doing so that I don't have an incentive to go do something else. And if people are really obsessed about politics, then maybe that's what we should be doing. People ask me all the time why I don't run for politics. And I'd lose in a landslide because these ideas are not popular by any means. And I'd have to deal with so much crap. So much nonsense, so much stupid questions, talking to adults who should know better. And the question is that the best use? And I don't believe it is. I believe the best use of my time is talking to young people. And YouTube is where young people are, and college campuses is where young people are, and Facebook is where young people are. And I would much rather be talking there than to a bunch of old Republicans who would show up to my talks and say, yeah, and and to a large extent not understand really anything I'm talking about. And then if I was successful, think of what, well, I'm not that worried about what the media would do to me. I think quite the contrary. If I became successful and the media came after me, I think I'd whip their ass. So I'm really not worried about the media. It really is what is the best use of time? And I have no ambition to be a politician. I have no interest in having power over other people. Zero, right? And then if you win, what do? Let's say I ran for Congress today and I won and I become one congressman among 400 and whatever. What do? Yeah, you have a platform, but nobody's going to interview you in the media because you're too radical. You're not going to get any bills passed because nobody will support you. The media is going to ignore you because you're too radical. So what's the value of being a member of the House of Representatives? Don't you think somebody like me, at least, has more value being outside of government? So now where's the tipping point? The tipping point is when there are enough people out there where your vote actually gets enough attention, where people start really, really, really paying attention to you. Right? I mean, look at Rand Paul. Rand Paul's not bad. On some issues, he's very good. Some issues, he's awful. But on a lot of issues, he's quite good. Then what? So what's he done? How has he changed the political discourse in America? Indeed, I think he sold out much of the political discourse, because here he is golfing with Trump, voting on a lot of bills that mean nothing, voting on a lot of bills that actually are anti-individual rights, compromising on his own principles. And it's not like he's using the bully pulpit in an effective, regular, large-scale way to get the ideas out there. Rand Paul did a little bit of that. His ideas were not always that good, but he at least did a little bit. Ron Paul is not being successful. Ron Paul's in the Senate. He has a lot more power than a congressman. So, well, Ron Paul maybe didn't compromise. I'm not sure. He voted against his own ideas a number of times. I actually think that Ron Paul did compromise. I think it's mythology. It's one of those mythological ideas that Ron Paul never compromised. I like Justin Amash on a lot of issues too, but what is he achieving? Is he changing the minds of Americans? Is he having an impact on the political debate? How often is he on television? How often is he speaking to the public? How often is he really, really engaged in a conversation, a principled conversation about ideas? Right? Yeah. All right. So Roy is trying to tempt me to discuss Donald Trump, but I'm not going to discuss Donald Trump today. You know what I think of Donald Trump, all of you. Well, I mean, I think you probably don't. I probably think he's a lot worse than you even think I think he is. But anyway, and let's see. Anything else? I think we're all good, right? We covered two big topics. Why Black communities and Hispanic communities poor, relative, and why, or many of them, of course, not everybody there's poor, and what is anti-concepts? That's a huge one, and then political activism. So let me just say, I'm not against political activism. If you can do it, if you can raise money, if you articulate, if you can deal with the bullshit that comes with politics, if you can handle it, if you enjoy it, if you're having fun with it, if you're getting in front of people, just don't compromise if you're going to run into politics. Because once you compromise, it's all over. Then you've done harm, not helped. So the tipping point is when there's enough people that you can get a significant vote to get significant attention, and where there are enough intellectuals in the intellectual sphere to leverage the fact that you're in politics, so you can bounce it off one another, so that you can work together to bring about greater and greater change out there. All right. Thank you all. By the way, if you want to ask real questions on YouTube, you have to use the super chat feature. You have to pay at least $1 or $1.99, whatever it is, to ask me a question. Tomorrow, we will be doing, I'll have a hangout. I'll have a number of people who are paid $100 or more a month, and they will be asking me questions live by video. But you will also, other Patreon subscribers will also be able to call in their questions. So some of the questions that I did not get to, Jennifer, for example, has been asking a question over and over again in the last few months, and I have not gotten to it because it never gets enough votes, but it's a really good question. So Jennifer, ask it tomorrow and we'll cover it. So tomorrow's like an open Q&A for Patreon subscribers. And then I expect also to do a show Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. No, maybe not Monday, but certainly Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so we'll cover a lot of topics in the next few days. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of newsy stuff that I haven't covered. There's Syria and what's going on in Syria in the Middle East. There's tariffs on automobiles. There is, just a gazillion things going on in the world. There's the off again, maybe on again, maybe off again, maybe on again, North Korea summit. So there's a bunch of foreign policy things. There's just a lot going on. There's the intellectual dark web. There's just, which is probably another anti-concept, really, if you think about it. And pretty crazy. So tomorrow, it'll be at the same time, same place. Friday will probably be same time, same place. And we'll see where we go from there. The other way, of course, to asking questions is become a patron. If you become a patron, and tomorrow you can call in, you'll get a phone number, and I'll answer your questions. All right, thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Oh, somebody came in with 100 rubles. Is that rubles? Rubles? I don't know what 100 rubles is. How much is 100 rubles? It's like, is that like I'm doing this for 10 cents? Or is it because, I know the ruble is being depreciated quite a bit. Can you comment on the Institute no longer wanting to finance your amazing talks all around the world? Who said that? Who said the Institute is not wanting to finance my amazing talks? Okay, so, the Institute has economic challenges. It has financial challenges. It's facing a particular acute financial challenge right now. Okay, so that's real money. 100 rubles is real money. Thank you. It's facing real challenges financially, and I'm not going to give you the reason for that right now because the Institute has to figure out how to communicate that to all of you in its own way. But there's been a significant downsizing at the Institute, and we've lost a significant contributor. And as a consequence of that, there's some figuring out of priorities, and exactly what priority my talks around the world are going to be is hard to tell at this point. We're still debating that, discussing that, strategizing about it. But I think you will find that I will be doing talks next year around the world. So I don't think it's going to zero. I just think we might have to scale back from what we've done. It's also true that this year we had a budget, and there was such demand for my talks outside of the United States that we've reached a budget, and I've given a lot of talks for free because there's so much demand, and I'm in the country anyway, and I'm traveling anyway, so I just do it. But the way it works right now is all the travel expenses, all the expenses associated with me speaking anywhere, I carry, and then the Institute for some of my talks is paying me a fee, which is supposed to cover my speaking fee plus all the travel expenses. So when I travel, I'm doing some stuff for free. I'm also trying to raise money independently to do the speaking. And I'm also hoping that the Institute, this year, the annual budget ends September 30th. So we will be negotiating next year's budget soon for the Russia event. I'd like to go to Russia in February to speak at an Ayn Rand conference on her birthday in St. Petersburg. And the question right now is, will the Institute fund that? And I just don't know. So I'm trying to raise money independent of the Institute. Paul, you're right. It's not completely, you're right in this sense. Now, it could be that the Institute comes around and funds it in the end. I just don't want to be dependent on that. So I'm trying to raise money right now. And I will get back to you in terms of whether I've raised the money, but I am trying to raise money right now to do this talk in St. Petersburg on Ayn Rand's birthday at an Ayn Rand conference in front of, I don't know, I was told anywhere between 100 to 200 plus people. It's really exciting. It's a great opportunity. But I looked at flights and a round trip business class ticket to St. Petersburg from Puerto Rico is somewhere around $5,000. So that's the minimum I would need to really justify the whole thing. I'd need something like $10,000. But I'm trying to find some rich Russians to do that. That would be the easiest way to do it. If not, we will see what the institute budget is for next year, and hopefully they will fund it. So we'll make it happen one way or the other. We will make it happen. Oh my God! Now you wake up with okay. This is the last super chat that I'm going to do. Because I just don't have the time. What's your opinion on U.S. companies using non-competes to prevent competition from former employees? Does it conflict with free trade right to work? Should courts protect the ability to work, or is an employer more important? I mean, it's a contract. An employer, if you sign a contract and you go and work for somebody, and as part of your contract there's a non-compete, there's a non-compete. I mean, I won't hire somebody who's going to take all the stuff he learned while working for me and go work for another hedge fund. And I won't even know if he's using my IP. So I might put in there non-compete. You can't work for a hedge fund that's similar to my hedge fund for 2 years after you leave me. And that's a contract in advance of employment. You don't want a job, don't take it. So I have no problem with non-competes if they are, voluntarily agreed upon them both on the part of two sides. But if you come to work for me and you sign a non-compete and then you say, I don't like it, and just ignore it and walk away, then you're in violation of a contract. So it's contract law. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not reducing anybody's rights. You don't have to sign the contract. Don't have to sign the contract. All right. So Dan, if you have a follow-up question, we can do that tomorrow. But I just don't see the issue. There's a lot of things that you can put in a contract that limit people's behavior. Now it has to have a time limit. You can't have it non-compete forever. It's usually 2 years or something like that. There's certain limitations the contract law places on what is a legitimate contract and what's an illegitimate contract. But as long as it abides by the qualification of a legitimate contract, absolutely non-competes are fine. Okay, I am wrapping up. Now, let me just mention tomorrow, I'll be on at 8 p.m. Eastern time, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, we'll do a Yaron and Amy show. I think those are 2 p.m. Eastern time. And Sunday, we'll do it in the middle of the day, Eastern time as well. So 8 p.m. during the week, midday, like 2 p.m. Eastern time, during the weekend for those of you who are wondering when the show is on. So set your timers, put it on your calendars. Hope to see you here live. Thank you for all the super chat questions. Hopefully you got satisfactory answers. And Paul will definitely be in touch within the next 30 days about the Russia event. One way or another, we will make it happen. Thank you all and have a great evening. And if you subscribe to Newsmax, then stay tuned. 9:30, I'm doing a Skype interview. I think it's on Syria with Joe Walsh. Talk to you all soon. Bye.
For using